At 25, Joe Brown had already seen more than most men twice his age. He had enlisted right after high school, driven by a desire to serve his country and make a difference. For years of combat had turned that idealism into a harsh reality. The daily grind of fighting the Taliban, surviving near-miss bombings, and witnessing the cruelty of war had left him mentally scarred. Despite the lack of physical injuries, the emotional wounds were deep and persistent. When he was finally sent back to the United States, Joe's return was far from triumphant. Instead of coming home to a hero's welcome, he was admitted to a mental hospital, a place he had hoped never to see. The transition from the battlefield to a sterile, white-walled room was jarring. The constant beeping of machines and the murmured conversations of other patients were a far cry from the chaos of combat. Joe Brown sat on the edge of his bed, his gaze fixed on the worn wooden floor. The sterile white walls of the mental hospital felt stifling, each moment a reminder of his troubled past. As he stared into space, his mind drifted back to the chaotic days in Afghanistan, the memories pressing in like a heavy fog. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted when the door to his room creaked open. Joe's eyes barely registered the woman who entered. She was a doctor, he could tell that much, but his vision was clouded by the haze of his memories. He saw her as if through a foggy lens, her presence barely piercing through the tumultuous scenes replaying in his mind. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle and calm. Joe didn't respond. He continued to stare blankly, squinting as if trying to see through the haze of his troubled thoughts. In his mind, he saw a vision of a beautiful woman, with blonde hair and blue eyes, stepping into his room. Her words seemed to drift in and out of focus, blending with the distant echoes of gunfire and the oppressive weight of his memories. The doctor, Mia Carrington, 30, observed him with a mix of compassion and concern. She could see the strain etched on his face and the faraway look in his eyes. Mia walked over to Joe and gently placed a small cup of water and a few pills on the bedside table. Her movements were deliberate and soothing, intended to provide a sense of calm in the midst of his turmoil. "Here," Mia said softly. "These will help. Try to take them with some water." Joe's eyes followed the cup as if it were an alien object. The sound of Mia's voice cut through the fog, but it was still distant and surreal. Slowly, he reached for the cup, his hands trembling slightly. The pills felt foreign in his mouth, and the water was a small comfort, its coolness a brief respite from the internal heat of his distress. Mia watched him with a professional yet empathetic gaze. She knew that gaining his trust would be a gradual process, but she was determined to help him find his way back from the brink. As she prepared to leave, she offered a reassuring smile, hoping to convey a sense of support, even if Joe's comprehension was clouded by his inner turmoil. "Take your time," she said gently. "I'll check in later." As the door closed behind her, Joe's thoughts began to settle, if only slightly. The encounter with Mia had been brief, but her kindness, however fleeting, was a small spark of hope in the darkness of his recovery. Mia approached Joe with a blend of empathy and professionalism, understanding that healing his mind would be a long and delicate process. She listened to his stories, not as a detached therapist but as someone deeply invested in his recovery. Her approach was a mix of traditional therapy and innovative techniques, and slowly, she began to make a difference. As the weeks turned into months, Joe started to open up. The nightmares and flashbacks became less frequent, and the darkness that had once enveloped him began to lift. Mia's patience and kindness were instrumental in his progress, and over time, Joe realized that he had developed feelings for her. Mia, too, found herself drawn to Joe. His strength and resilience were inspiring, and she admired his determination to overcome his past. Their professional relationship grew into a deep friendship, and as Joe's recovery continued, their feelings for each other evolved into something more. Joe Brown sat on the edge of his bed, his gaze fixed on the worn wooden floor of his small room. The sterile white walls of the mental hospital felt oppressive, the air heavy with the scent of antiseptic and the hum of fluorescent lights. His mind wandered back to the dusty streets and chaotic scenes of Afghanistan, where he had spent nearly 4 grueling years. As he closed his eyes, the memories came crashing back with vivid clarity. One particular mission replayed in his mind with disturbing precision. It had been a covert operation, aimed at eliminating a high-ranking Taliban chief believed to be hiding in a secluded house on the outskirts of a war-torn village. The night had been tense, shrouded in darkness and anticipation. 5 U.S. Army jeeps, filled with 20 soldiers, had rolled silently through the desert landscape. The men were clad in their combat gear, their faces set with grim determination. As they approached the target area, the low rumble of a military helicopter overhead signaled the beginning of the operation. Joe remembered the way the jeeps had formed a perimeter around the house, their headlights cutting through the darkness. The soldiers, moving with practiced precision, had taken their positions and begun their assault. The air was filled with the deafening sound of machine guns as they fired at the windows, shattering glass and sending shards flying into the night. The rhythm of the gunfire was almost hypnotic, a relentless barrage that seemed to echo in Joe's ears long after it had stopped. Hand grenades were lobbed through the broken windows, exploding with a violent roar that lit up the night sky. The explosions were followed by the acrid smell of smoke and burning debris. Joe could still hear the screams that had pierced through the chaos, mingling with the relentless noise of gunfire. When the dust finally settled, the house was reduced to a smoking ruin. The aftermath was grim. Joe and his unit had discovered the bodies of 8 people, including a woman and 2 children. Their lifeless forms lay amidst the debris, a tragic testament to the collateral damage of war. The sight had been horrifying and heartbreaking, a stark reminder of the innocent lives lost in the pursuit of their mission. The memory of that night haunted Joe, the faces of the deceased and the sounds of their suffering etched into his mind. He struggled to reconcile the reality of the mission with the cost of human life it had exacted. Each night, as he lay in his hospital bed, the images replayed in his mind, the pain and guilt surfacing anew. It was during these dark moments of reflection that Mia Carrington's voice would come gently through the hospital room, guiding him through the labyrinth of his thoughts and emotions. Her empathy provided a sliver of solace, and her dedication to his recovery was a beacon of hope in the midst of his turmoil. The day Joe was released from the hospital was bittersweet. He felt a sense of accomplishment and hope, but he also knew he would miss the comfort and support Mia had provided. She had become a beacon of light in his darkest times, and the prospect of life without her was daunting. With Mia's encouragement, Joe found a job as a mechanic at a local car dealership. The work was a welcome distraction from his past, and he threw himself into it with the same dedication he had shown in the Army. The physical labor and the camaraderie with his new colleagues helped him rebuild his sense of purpose. Mia and Joe continued to see each other outside of the hospital, their relationship blossoming into a deep and meaningful romance. They supported each other through the ups and downs of life, and Joe found solace in the stability Mia brought into his life. Their love was a testament to the power of healing and the strength of the human spirit. Joe's journey from the battlefield to the mechanic's shop was a story of resilience and hope, and his bond with Mia was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always the possibility of finding light and love. As Joe worked on cars and built a new life, he knew that his past would always be a part of him. But with Mia by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that he had finally found peace and happiness amidst the ashes of his former life. Joe Brown leaned against the hood of a car in the dimly lit garage of the dealership, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above providing a steady, calming backdrop to his thoughts. His hands, stained with grease and oil, had become accustomed to the routine of fixing engines and troubleshooting mechanical issues. It was a far cry from the chaos of the battlefield, and Joe had found a measure of peace in the steady rhythm of his work. Yet, as he wiped his hands on a rag, his thoughts often drifted back to the mental hospital and the woman who had played a pivotal role in his recovery, Dr. Mia Carrington. Despite the years that had passed since his discharge, memories of her remained vivid in his mind. Mia had been more than just a doctor to Joe. She was strikingly beautiful, with her blonde hair and clear blue eyes that seemed to see through the surface, reaching into the depths of his soul. But it was not just her physical appearance that had captured his attention. Mia had a good heart. She was considerate, understanding, and always approached her work with a gentle authority that commanded respect. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of confidence and knowledge, offering reassurance in the midst of his darkest moments. Joe often found himself reflecting on how Mia had managed to break through the walls he had erected around himself. Her approach was never clinical or detached. Instead, she treated him with the same care and empathy that one would expect from a close friend. She had never been married, a fact that Joe found oddly attractive. The absence of such commitments, he thought, made her more accessible, more real, and somehow more endearing. To Joe's surprise, Mia had eventually revealed that her feelings for him were not one-sided. The realization that she harbored feelings for him too had come as a shock. Joe had never imagined that someone as remarkable as Mia could reciprocate his affection. The knowledge that their feelings were mutual had added a layer of complexity to his emotions, blending hope with the lingering shadows of his past. As he tightened a bolt on the engine, Joe couldn't help but smile at the thought of Mia. The connection they had shared was a beacon of light amidst the remnants of his troubled past. It was a reminder that even in the darkest corners of his life, there had been a spark of warmth and understanding, a spark that had grown into something beautiful. He continued to work, each task bringing him a step closer to the normalcy he had sought since leaving the war. And as he moved through his days, the thought of Mia remained a comforting constant, a testament to the healing power of love and the unexpected ways in which it could emerge from the most challenging of circumstances. Joe Brown worked methodically beneath the hood of a car, the steady rhythm of his hands a soothing counterpoint to the clatter of tools and the hum of the dealership's machinery. The familiar scent of motor oil and gasoline was a welcome change from the antiseptic sterility of the mental hospital. Working as a mechanic was more than just a job for Joe. It was a return to his roots. Before he had joined the Army, Joe had spent countless hours working on cars. It was a profession he had learned from his father and had always been passionate about. The sense of satisfaction that came from fixing a broken engine was something he had missed during his years of service. When he was a schoolboy, the idea of joining the Army had seemed like an exciting adventure, a chance to be a hero and make a difference. The allure of discipline, camaraderie, and a higher purpose had drawn him in. But the reality of military life had been starkly different from his youthful dreams. The Army, with its rigorous discipline and unyielding demands, was a far cry from the organized but flexible world of civilian life. The harshness and cruelty of combat, the constant threat of violence, and the emotional toll of seeing his comrades fall had shattered his romanticized notions of military service. Joe had quickly learned that the Army's discipline was not the structured, supportive environment he had envisioned. It was a world where orders were absolute, and the human cost of conflict was often disregarded. The brutal reality of war, with its unrelenting stress and the constant danger, was something he had not anticipated. It was a harsh environment that tested his limits and made him question his place in it. As he tightened the final bolt on the engine, Joe reflected on how different his life had become since his return. The simplicity of working on cars was a grounding force, a reminder of the life he had before he had been swept into the chaos of war. It was a stark contrast to the relentless demands of military life, and he appreciated the stability and control it offered. Joe's experiences had left him with a deep sense of disillusionment about the Army, but also with a renewed appreciation for the quieter, more predictable aspects of life. The mechanic's life, with its tangible results and manageable challenges, was a welcome return to normalcy, a place where he could find solace and rebuild himself, far removed from the harsh realities of his past. The sun was beginning to set on a beautiful Saturday evening, casting a warm golden glow over the city. Joe Brown glanced at the clock on his dashboard as he pulled up to Mia Carrington's house. It was just past 7 p.m., and he was eager to start their evening together. His heart raced slightly with anticipation. Tonight was special, a chance to enjoy Mia's company outside the confines of the mental hospital where they had first met. Mia's house was an elegant mansion situated in one of the city's elite neighborhoods. The sprawling estate had a classic charm, with manicured lawns and well-tended gardens. As Joe parked the car, he admired the grandeur of the place, noting the soft light emanating from the windows, which hinted at the comfort and warmth inside. He stepped out of the car and walked up the stone pathway to the front door. A moment later, the door swung open to reveal Mia, dressed in a chic but understated outfit that highlighted her natural beauty. Her blonde hair cascaded in loose waves, and her blue eyes sparkled with excitement. She greeted Joe with a warm smile that made his heart skip a beat. "Hi, Joe," Mia said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "Are you ready for our dinner?" "Absolutely," Joe replied with a grin. "I've been looking forward to this all week." As they walked to the car, Mia mentioned that she had been looking forward to their evening out too. Joe opened the passenger door for her and, once she was settled, he slid into the driver's seat. The drive to the classic Mexican restaurant was filled with light-hearted conversation and laughter. The restaurant was a charming, family-owned place that had been a staple in Mia's neighborhood for years. Its colorful decor and lively atmosphere were a perfect setting for their evening. Joe parked the car and led Mia inside, where they were greeted by the aroma of freshly prepared Mexican cuisine and the vibrant sounds of Latin music. They were seated at a cozy table near a window, which offered a view of the softly illuminated street outside. As they looked over the menu, Mia shared stories about her hobbies. "You know," she began, "I've developed quite a passion for gardening. It's something I've been doing at the family mansion for a few years now. My parents' place has this beautiful compound, and I've turned part of it into a little garden oasis." Joe's eyes lit up with interest. "That sounds amazing. What do you grow there?" "A bit of everything," Mia said with a smile. "Flowers, vegetables, herbs. I find it incredibly relaxing. It's a great way to unwind after a long day at work." Joe nodded appreciatively. "I can imagine. I used to play American football at the local club before I joined the army. It was my way of letting off steam and having fun with friends. I guess everyone needs their own way to escape and recharge." Their conversation flowed effortlessly as they ordered their meals. Mia chose a plate of enchiladas, while Joe opted for tacos. They both enjoyed the food, exchanging bites of their dishes and sharing their thoughts on the flavors. The restaurant's ambience made it easy to forget the outside world, and they immersed themselves in each other's company. As the evening progressed, their conversation turned to more personal topics. Mia spoke about her life at the mansion. "You know, it's a bit unusual, but I live with my parents in their big house. It has 8 rooms and 8 bathrooms. It's a beautiful place, but it can be a bit lonely sometimes." Joe listened intently. "That sounds like a lot of space. What's it like living there?" "It's nice, but it can be a bit overwhelming," Mia admitted. "After medical school, I lived on my own for a couple of years. It was a nice break from the house, but my father persuaded me to move back in with them. He said it would be good for me, but honestly, I had to give up a lot of my independence. It's not that they control my life or anything. It's just that I feel like I lost a bit of my autonomy." Joe nodded, understanding the complexity of her situation. "It must be tough to balance that, but at least you have the freedom to pursue your interests, like your gardening." Mia's face lit up at the mention of her hobby. "Yes, exactly. Gardening has become my escape, my way of finding a little piece of tranquility amidst everything." Their conversation continued to flow smoothly, punctuated by laughter and shared stories. As the night wore on, Joe felt a deep sense of contentment. Being with Mia, sharing their experiences and dreams, felt right. He admired not just her physical beauty, but her kindness and intelligence, qualities that had drawn him to her from the start. After dinner, they took a leisurely stroll back to the car, their conversation continuing in the soft glow of the streetlights. The night air was crisp and refreshing, adding a touch of magic to their evening. As they arrived back at Mia's mansion, Joe walked her to the door, his hand gently brushing against hers. "I had a great time tonight," he said sincerely. "Thank you for sharing this evening with me." Mia looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the warmth she felt. "I had a wonderful time too, Joe. It's been really nice to spend time together outside of the hospital." They stood in silence for a moment, the connection between them palpable. Joe felt a flutter of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, their relationship could grow into something more meaningful. Mia finally broke the silence with a soft smile. "Would you like to do this again sometime?" Joe's heart leaped at her words. "I'd love that," he said with a genuine smile. "Let's plan something soon." As Mia opened the door and stepped inside, she turned back to give Joe one last look. "Good night, Joe. Thanks again for a lovely evening." "Good night, Mia," Joe replied, watching as she closed the door behind her. Joe walked back to his car, his mind filled with the pleasant memories of the evening. The drive home was serene, the stars shining brightly in the clear night sky. He felt a renewed sense of hope and excitement about the future, knowing that he had found someone truly special in Mia. As he parked his car and prepared to head inside, Joe couldn't help but smile. Tonight had been a perfect reminder of the simple joys in life and the possibilities that lay ahead. The clock on Joe Brown's wall ticked away the seconds, marking the end of another routine day. It was Tuesday evening, around 8 p.m. Joe had just settled into his favorite armchair, eager to unwind after a long day at the car dealership, when he remembered his plans to call Mia Carrington. He had been looking forward to catching up with her and hearing about her day. He picked up his cell phone and dialed Mia's number. After a few rings, the call went to voicemail. Joe frowned and tried again, hoping it was just a temporary issue. When his second call also went unanswered, he felt a knot of concern tighten in his stomach. He tried a third time, but still there was no response. Feeling increasingly uneasy, Joe decided to call Mia's father, Thomas Carrington. He dialed the number and waited as the call connected. After a few rings, Mr. Carrington's voice came through, sounding strained. "Hello, Mr. Carrington. This is Joe Brown," Joe said, trying to keep his tone calm. "I've been trying to reach Mia, but her phone is off. Do you know what's going on?" There was a moment of silence on the other end, and Joe could almost hear the heavy sigh that followed. "Joe," Mr. Carrington began, his voice low and filled with concern. "Something not good has happened. The police found Mia's car at the hospital parking lot, but it was not locked, and she's nowhere to be seen. We're at the police station now, talking to them. You can come here if you like." Joe's heart pounded in his chest. "I'm on my way," he said, his voice steady despite the rising panic inside him. He grabbed his car keys, his hands shaking slightly as he fumbled with them. Without a moment to spare, he dashed out of his apartment and hurried to his car. The drive to the police station was a blur of red lights and anxious thoughts. His mind raced through every possible scenario, none of which offered any comfort. Upon arriving at the police station, Joe found Mr. Carrington waiting in the lobby. Thomas Carrington looked older and more worried than Joe had ever seen him. His usually composed demeanor was now replaced by a visible anxiety. "Joe," Mr. Carrington greeted him with a grim nod. "Thank you for coming. We're still waiting to hear more from the police. They're trying to piece together what happened." Joe nodded, feeling a mixture of apprehension and determination. "Have they found any leads? Anything that could tell us where Mia might be?" Mr. Carrington shook his head. "Not yet, but we received a phone call just before you arrived. The caller demanded a ransom of $500,000 for Mia's safe return. The police are advising us on what to do, but it's a delicate situation. They're weighing the risks of involving them in the ransom negotiations or keeping it discreet." Joe's stomach churned at the mention of the ransom. "What are we supposed to do?" Mr. Carrington ran a hand through his hair, clearly distressed. "The police are torn. They think that if we pay the ransom, there's a chance Mia could be returned safely. But if we involve them, it could scare the kidnappers and put her in further danger. They haven't given us a clear direction yet." Joe could see the anguish in Mr. Carrington's eyes and felt an overwhelming urge to help. "Is there anything I can do? I know it's not much, but I want to assist in any way possible." Before Mr. Carrington could respond, a police officer approached them. "Mr. Carrington, Mr. Brown, we've reviewed the security footage from the hospital parking lot. The car was left there around 6:30 p.m., and there's no sign of struggle. We're trying to track any leads, but so far, nothing concrete." Joe's mind raced as he absorbed the information. Did the security cameras capture anything unusual? Maybe someone leaving the area? The officer nodded. "There was a figure seen near the car around the time it was left. We're trying to enhance the footage, but the image is unclear. We'll keep you updated as we make progress. Mr. Carrington's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his face going pale. It's the caller. They're insisting on the ransom. They're giving us a deadline. Joe's heart sank. He could see how overwhelmed Mr. Carrington was. The thought of Mia being in danger, coupled with the pressure of making the right decision, was clearly taking a toll on him. What's the plan? Joe asked, his voice steady despite his growing anxiety. We're considering paying the ransom, Mr. Carrington said quietly, but the police have advised against making any decisions without their guidance. They're worried about the possibility of a trap. They want to monitor the situation closely to see if they can trace the caller. Joe took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. We need to do everything we can to ensure Mia's safety. I don't want to take any chances. The police officer nodded in agreement. We'll do our best to track down the caller and ensure Mia's safe return. In the meantime, keep your phones on and stay alert for any updates. Joe and Mr. Carrington waited in anxious silence, the minutes ticking by slowly. The atmosphere in the police station was tense, each passing second adding to the mounting pressure of the situation. Hours seemed to pass as they waited for news. Joe's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and fears. He thought about Mia, her laughter, her warmth, and the way she had brightened his life. The idea of losing her was unbearable. Just before midnight, the police officer returned with an update. We've been able to trace the call to a location not far from here. We're planning a sting operation to catch the kidnapper and rescue Mia. We need your cooperation and discretion throughout this process. Mr. Carrington looked relieved but still apprehensive. We'll do whatever it takes. Just please, make sure Mia is safe. Joe nodded in agreement, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that they had to stay hopeful and work together to bring Mia back safely. The next few hours would be crucial, and he hoped that the police's efforts would lead to a positive outcome. As the night wore on, Joe stayed by Mr. Carrington's side, offering support and reassurance. The tension in the air was palpable, but amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was a glimmer of hope that they would soon have good news. In the quiet of the police station, Joe kept his thoughts focused on Mia, determined to see this through and bring her back to safety. The night was far from over, but he was resolute in his commitment to do everything in his power to ensure her safe return. The sterile, buzzing lights of the police station illuminated the worried faces of Thomas Carrington and Joe Brown. The air was thick with tension as they waited for any updates on Mia's whereabouts. Thomas paced the room, his anxiety evident in every step, while Joe tried to remain composed, his mind racing with concerns for Mia's safety. The police chief, a tall man with a stern expression named Chief Harrison, entered the room with a sense of urgency. Mr. Carrington, he said, his tone firm but reassuring. We've managed to track the call to a certain extent. We need to keep the kidnapper on the line for at least 3 minutes to get a better fix on their location. Thomas's eyes widened. But how do we do that? I'm afraid they might just hang up if they suspect anything. Chief Harrison nodded. We understand your concern. We'll need you to make the call. It's crucial that we keep them talking. Do you have the ransom money ready? Thomas nodded, his face pale. Yes. I have $500,000 with me right now. Good. Here's what we'll do, Chief Harrison explained. You'll call the kidnapper and keep them talking. We'll be monitoring the call closely and trying to triangulate their location. Try to remain calm and don't reveal too much. Remember, we need to buy as much time as possible. Thomas took a deep breath and nodded. He took out his cell phone, his hands trembling as he dialed the number provided by the kidnapper. The phone rang several times before someone answered on the other end. The voice that came through was low and menacing. Hello, Thomas said, trying to keep his voice steady. This is Thomas Carrington. I have $500,000 with me now. Can you tell me where I will meet you? There was a pause on the other end before the kidnapper responded. You'll call me tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll give you the exact location then. Thomas's heart sank. He needed more information, more reassurance. Can you let me speak to Mia? I want to know she's okay. For a moment, there was silence, and then Thomas heard a faint, distressed voice coming through the line. "Daddy, Daddy, are you there?" Thomas's heart skipped a beat. "Mia." "Yes, it's me. I'm here. Are you all right?" The connection crackled, and he could hear the muffled sounds of a struggle in the background. "Daddy, I'm scared." Mia's voice trembled. "Please hurry." Before Thomas could respond, the line went dead. The sudden silence was deafening. Thomas stared at his phone in shock, his heart racing with fear and frustration. Joe, who had been standing by, placed a reassuring hand on Thomas's shoulder. "We're working on it, Mr. Carrington," Chief Harrison said, his voice calm but urgent. "We've got the call data. Our team is already analyzing it. We'll do everything we can to find Mia." Thomas nodded, though he could barely hold back his tears. He felt helpless, standing in the middle of the police station while his daughter was in danger. "Please," he said, his voice cracking, "find her as quickly as you can." The hours dragged on as the police worked tirelessly to trace the call. Joe remained by Thomas's side, offering support and encouragement. They could only wait and hope that the authorities would be able to pinpoint the kidnapper's location before it was too late. Finally, as dawn began to break, Chief Harrison approached Thomas and Joe with a weary but hopeful expression. "We've managed to get a partial location from the call data. It's not exact, but we have a general area where the call was made. Our teams are heading there now to investigate." Thomas's eyes widened with a mix of hope and anxiety. "Thank you, Chief. Please, let me know as soon as you have any news." As the police mobilized their efforts to locate Mia, Joe stayed with Thomas, providing whatever comfort he could. The tension in the air was palpable, and every minute felt like an eternity. Thomas clung to the hope that Mia would be found safe and that the nightmare would soon be over. By mid-morning, the police had made significant progress. Chief Harrison returned with a serious look on his face. "We've identified a potential location based on the call data. It's an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. We're preparing to raid the place now." Thomas's heart pounded in his chest. "Please find her. She's all I have." The raid was swift and precise. The police stormed the warehouse, and after what felt like an eternity of waiting, Chief Harrison returned with a relieved expression. "We found her," he said, his voice filled with relief. "Mia is safe. She's been taken to the hospital for a checkup, but she's all right." Thomas let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, tears streaming down his face as he clutched Joe's arm. "Thank you," he whispered, overwhelmed with gratitude. Joe, too, felt a wave of relief wash over him. "I'm so glad she's safe." Later that day, as Thomas and Joe visited Mia in the hospital, the atmosphere was filled with a mix of joy and exhaustion. Mia, though shaken, was surrounded by her family and friends, grateful to be safe and to have the support of those who cared about her. "Daddy," Mia said softly as she hugged her father, "thank you for everything. I was so scared." Thomas held her tightly, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm just glad you're safe, Mia. I love you." Joe, standing nearby, watched the heartfelt reunion with a sense of relief and gratitude. It had been a harrowing experience, but in the end, Mia's safety was what mattered most. As he looked at Mia and Thomas, he knew that their bond had only grown stronger through this ordeal. The following days were spent recovering from the trauma and finding solace in the company of loved ones. Joe and Mia's relationship had been tested, but their connection had emerged even stronger. They both knew that life could be unpredictable, but their commitment to each other remained unwavering. In the aftermath of the ordeal, Joe and Mia found comfort in the ordinary moments they shared together. Their connection was a testament to the strength of their bond, and they cherished every moment of peace and happiness they could find. As they looked back on the events of that fateful day, they realized that while the world could be full of unexpected challenges, the support and love of those who mattered most could make all the difference. The Friday evening air was crisp, hinting at the arrival of a cool autumn. Joe Brown walked with a purposeful stride towards the charming Chinese restaurant he had chosen for their special night. The restaurant, nestled on a quiet street, was known for its warm ambience and exquisite cuisine, a perfect setting for the moment he had been planning for weeks. As Joe approached the entrance, he glanced at his watch. It was nearly 7 p.m., and Mia Carrington was expected to arrive any minute. Joe had carefully arranged every detail of the evening, hoping to create a memorable experience that would mark a significant turn in their relationship. The restaurant's interior was softly lit, with flickering candles on each table and the subtle scent of ginger and garlic wafting through the air. Joe had reserved a cozy corner table with a view of the street, providing a serene backdrop for what he hoped would be an unforgettable evening. Mia arrived promptly, her entrance marked by the jingle of the doorbell and a smile that immediately brightened the room. She was dressed elegantly in a deep red dress that accentuated her graceful features. Joe's heart swelled with affection as he rose to greet her. "Hi, Mia," Joe said, his voice filled with warmth. "You look stunning tonight." "Thank you, Joe," Mia replied, her eyes twinkling. "You look quite dashing yourself." They were shown to their table, and as they settled in, the waiter brought over menus and a complimentary appetizer. They began to chat, their conversation flowing effortlessly as it always did. They talked about their week, shared anecdotes from their respective jobs, and laughed over funny memories. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and the evening felt like a seamless extension of the countless wonderful moments they had shared before. The food arrived, and they indulged in an array of delectable dishes: crispy spring rolls, flavorful dumplings, and savory Peking duck. Each bite was a delight, and the meal was punctuated with light-hearted banter and the occasional clink of glasses. The warmth of the restaurant and the intimacy of their conversation made the evening feel special. As the evening progressed, Joe felt the anticipation building inside him. He had planned this night for a long time, and now it was finally time to take the step he had been dreaming of. He signaled to the waiter to bring out a small surprise he had arranged earlier, a beautifully decorated cake with a single red rose on top. When the waiter placed the cake on their table, Mia's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, Joe, this is so sweet. What's the occasion?" Joe smiled, his nerves evident but his determination unwavering. "I thought it would be the perfect way to end a perfect evening." After the cake was served and enjoyed, Joe took a deep breath, knowing the moment had arrived. He reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved a small velvet box. Mia looked at him with curiosity, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Joe cleared his throat, his heart racing. "Mia, over the past few months, I've come to realize just how much you mean to me. Every moment we spend together makes me appreciate you more and more. You've brought so much joy into my life, and I can't imagine my future without you." He knelt down on one knee, opening the box to reveal a sparkling engagement ring. The soft glow of the restaurant lights made the diamond gleam, casting a subtle shimmer on the table. "Mia," Joe continued, his voice trembling with emotion, "will you marry me?" Mia's hand flew to her mouth, and tears welled up in her eyes. She gasped, her emotions overcoming her as she looked at the man she loved. The sheer happiness on her face was undeniable, and she struggled to find words through her tears. "Yes, Joe," she finally managed to say, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will." Joe slipped the ring onto Mia's finger, and as he stood up, Mia threw her arms around him. They hugged tightly, their embrace filled with the joy and relief of the moment. For several minutes, they held each other, savoring the happiness that seemed to fill the entire restaurant. After they pulled away, Mia smiled through her tears, and Joe wiped a tear from her cheek. They sat back down at their table, still basking in the glow of their shared excitement. Joe signaled to the waiter for a bottle of champagne, wanting to celebrate their engagement in style. The champagne arrived, and Joe expertly opened the bottle, pouring the bubbly liquid into their glasses. They clinked their glasses together, their faces beaming with happiness. The soft pop of the cork and the gentle fizz of the champagne added to the festive atmosphere. As they sipped their champagne, they continued to talk and laugh, reminiscing about their favorite moments together and discussing their future plans. The evening seemed to stretch on forever, filled with laughter, love, and the promise of a shared future. The restaurant began to empty as the hours passed, and the night grew quieter. The once bustling atmosphere became more serene, and the soft strains of background music seemed to enhance the intimacy of their celebration. Joe and Mia reveled in the joy of their engagement, the world outside fading into the background as they focused on each other. They shared stories and dreams, discussing their hopes for the future and the life they envisioned building together. Every word was filled with love and excitement, and the night felt like a magical prelude to the rest of their lives. As midnight approached, Joe and Mia finally decided it was time to head home. They gathered their things, their hearts still overflowing with happiness. Joe offered his arm to Mia, and they walked out of the restaurant hand in hand. The night air was cool and refreshing, a perfect end to a perfect evening. They walked to Joe's car, their steps light and their spirits high. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, and the world felt like a place of endless possibilities. As they drove away from the restaurant, Mia leaned her head against the window, her smile never fading. Joe glanced over at her, his heart full of love and gratitude. He knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but he was ready to face them all with Mia by his side. The night was theirs, and as they drove through the quiet streets, Joe and Mia felt an overwhelming sense of contentment. They had taken a significant step in their journey together, and the future was filled with promise and joy. The night ended with a gentle kiss and a shared promise of a bright future. As they parted ways, both Joe and Mia knew that their love was strong and enduring. It was a night they would always remember, a testament to their commitment and the beginning of a beautiful new chapter in their lives. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of the story. If you felt the tension, the emotion, and the twist of this tale, then I have done my job right. This kind of story reminds us the power dynamic that exists in our world and how sometimes the unexpected happen when least expected. If you enjoy this, please don't forget to hit the like button, share your thought in the comment, and of course subscribe to the channel for more stories that dig deep into the human experiences. Until next time, stay curious and stay inspired. I'll see you in the next video.